As a result of this forum this evening, we can do a little bit more to make this a better world, maybe stop this war from accelerating the way it is. It will be your peers, mostly those of you in this audience, young men and young women, that we send yet again off to a war. There is a relationship between this war and prejudice at a global macrocosmic level, and this very local form of prejudice that we see in the face of this crime. We have been here before many times. We will be here again. And I want to welcome again, if they don't mind me referring to them in their first names, Zena and Jack and Sam, who I will refer to. I will be the great bouncer for this evening. I'll try not to say anything else, but I do want you to make note of a couple of things. A quote you might have heard many times in your life: all evil needs to exist is enough good people doing nothing. And the second thing is that there was alcohol involved in this crime, and you might want to make note of that. The extent to which drugs and alcohol precipitates the acceleration and stimulates these sorts of feelings that form the subtext of a nation that remains, after having been born in genocide and the slave trade, a racist nation. What can we do about this? I would like to open up the floor for questions, but I first would like to add each of our panelists to speak for about 5 minutes about their thoughts and feelings and offer their reflections, and make notes as you're listening so that we can ask some healthy questions. We can be here for a while this evening, so you may want to not just end with your remarks, but we may come out hopefully this evening with some sort of action plan. So I'd like to ask Jack, if you would, to go first, or Sam. Would you like to go first? Sam, why don't you go first? I think we agreed the other night that you would share your thoughts first.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Again, I'll just reintroduce myself. My name is Sam Williams. And I want to just start by saying that it's truly a privilege to be, just be able to present a few of my thoughts in regards to the video, and to be sitting in between two very important people who, my presence allow me to look somewhat important also. I guess I would stop by, there was a comment that was made about justice being served. And that was one of many comments that rang out in my mind. And when the comment was made, I thought to myself, would that eliminate the pain? Would justice being served eliminate the pain? And I thought about that because, for one, we watched a video where there was no blood. We watched a video where there were no graphics and body parts being dismembered. They talked about this stuff, but we didn't see it. But so often on television and in other mass media, we are stimulated, excited, and drawn to things of that nature. And that's what drew me also when I heard about the context of the video. Then I sat back and I said, there was no blood. There were no graphics. I want to say that race-related crimes, hate crimes, exposes the history of pain that exists in our society, in our communities, in our homes, in our hearts. This incident, I believe, could have happened 20 years ago. And a lot of the feelings that were aroused by the mentioning of a lot of the powerful historical symbols that were mentioned would have resurfaced and exposed a lot of that pain that oftentimes lives silently and quietly in all of us because we don't talk about this stuff. If you think about the SWAT sticker, and the guy said, our community and their community, they were celebrating separately the Ku Klux Klan symbol, the Aryan Brotherhood, white power, the Confederate flag, the separate cemetery lots, Jim Crow. They are remnants. Those things are remaining symbols of a history and histories of incidences and occurrences and things that some of us have either read or have experienced or have been told through stories from our grandmothers and grandfathers and pain. As I was watching the faces of not only the people of color who were affected by that tragedy, the horrendousness and the brutality of the act, I seen pain. If you looked into the face of James Sean Berry's brother, you seen pain, you seen a hurt, and I think sometimes these isolated occurrences that happen in our society resurfaces the pain, and there are many. And it's no surprise when things of this nature happen, the pain comes back. It's because the pain, unfortunately, continues to not be treated. And so my reaction is to, one, have us all think about the conditions of our own heart. Have us all think about the conditions of our own mind. And how does that relate to who we are and where we come from and where we're going? Because for me, it's too easy to sit here and talk about black and white differences. We've heard the stories and we've seen the videos and we know the ending lines. But the pain that exists and continues to be fed and perpetuated through not identifying, treating it, and really understanding the root of it, oftentimes allow situations like this to resurface. And so I offer those thoughts that we all challenge and really think about the condition of our own hearts as it is related to a lot of the things that drew the anger, the frustration, the disbelief, the denial, because for me, all those feelings kind of resurfaced and went all over the place when I seen the video. But it's a pain that exists in all of us that I think that needs to be treated collectively, individually, spiritually, emotionally. And until we treat it and continue to treat it in healthy ways, it will continue to hurt.
Thank you, Sam. Zena, you want to go next?
Sure. A question first to the audience. Go back in your life and times. For some of us, this will be a further journey to the wonder years, somewhere between 1 and 12. And call to your heart and to your mind the very first time you felt different that you can recall. What was it? I'm not going to ask you to share it, but just remember it. The very first time as a child in elementary school when you felt different. Okay? For how many people in this room was that a positive experience? Would you raise your hands? One. Anybody else? Being different in this country and in this society is negative. People will rush to move away from that which is different, rush to negate that which is different, rush to eradicate that which is different. For difference felt right here, not here, not here, right here is scary, is frightening. It's a room of 150 people, one sister who had the fortune of finding difference as a positive place. Second question. Think for me throughout your life, not the Wonder Years now, of one of the most important lessons you've learned in your life. Again, I won't ask you to share it, but think with me, all of us, of something that you learned that was important. Can you draw it to your heart and to your mind? Here's the question. How many of you gained that knowledge, learned that wisdom, gathered that understanding in a time of comfort and ease? Would you raise your hands? One. I want to know you. Raise your hands high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Understand that our learning, the deepest learning, the most important learning, rises not from times of ease, but times of great and utter distress and even tragedy. You were looking at a Protestant minister. I work at Trinity, but I'm Baptist, and my church is Union Baptist Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where the Reverend Jeffrey Brown is my pastor. I have Mississippi parents. I was born in 1956. I'm 46 years old. I'll be 47 soon. You see what I look like. I had parents, one who to me looked vanilla, who was black but quite fair, and another one who looked like deep brown chocolate. In 1959 in Cairo, Illinois, while I was misbehaving, my mother yanked my ponytail. A white woman scooped me up in her arms and said, this Negro, now you know what color my mom was, is harassing this child. Somebody come get this child, because I had less color and more hair at the age of 3. My father, a wise man, scooped his little pregnant wife, young child, into a car and headed to northeast Mississippi, where my parents were from. I learned the lesson that day at the age of 3. That difference could get you in deep trouble. Now, what do these two questions have to do with the tragedy that we just saw? With the tragedy that we are on the brink of in our nation? I think God uses tragedy to get our attention. I think when things are too easy, we get too complacent and forget who we are. I think God allows deep, hurtful tragedy so that rooms like this are filled with young men and women who are on the front line. Am I sorry it happened? Absolutely. Can we benefit from it? 100%. There is a way of preaching and a way of praying that I teach. I teach a preaching class at BU. I TA, so co-teach a class at BU. And one of the ways we teach preaching and praying is a little formula called ACTS, A-C-T-S. And that little formula applies, I hope, to our conversation tonight. The A is acknowledge. Acknowledge what for you and for me is the reality of this event. Acknowledge that we each have lived different histories, and we see this film through different eyes, but we must find a common way to speak. Acknowledge that evil exists. It is not a concept. It is not an illusion. It exists. Acknowledge that we've had different experiences, and again, we have to find a common place and way to talk. Acknowledge that pain is real and hate is real, and the two are not separated. Acknowledge that we learn differently as we sit, but we've got to bring our wisdom together. Confess. And confess simply means to make known. In the Greek, it means to agree. What do we confess? That traditions cut both ways, good and bad. And all of our traditions have to be examined. We confess that we define justice differently. We confess that this is not isolated. And it happens in Boston, and it happens in Cambridge, and I live in Waltham, and it happens there. We have to confess that we harbor our own interpretations. And until we find forums where we can bring them together, they harbor and fester in isolation inside of us. Witness, don't you know the University of Michigan wishes they could take that hat and shirt off that boy? I'm glad I went to Northwestern. Give thanks. What in the world do we give thanks for? In the Greek New Testament, Paul says, in all circumstances, not some, not the ones you want, in all circumstances, give thanks. For what can we give thanks? The awakening that is present in this room, divine hand that guides, and the prayers that we heard, and for anger and righteousness, for they are twin sides of the same coin. The word in the text says be angry and sin not. It does not say don't be angry. But what do you do with anger, and how do you turn it toward righteousness? Last thing, supplication. Supplication means asking earnestly for. What is our supplication? For the children that were in that video. Think of the children who were at the feet of that ex-con, who had some learning. Think of the children who were in and around the trial. Think of the children when you see the whole video. There are many scenes of children running in the streets. My supplication is that you and I figure out the first 3 steps, that we might lift a world that understands and honors that difference is held here as negative, and we've got to switch that and become like my sister. And honor that we learn in the crucible moment and not run from it, not ignore it, but embrace it and go further.
Thank you. Now I wish I had gone first. No, I think we've previewed a very important, interesting film entitled "The Two Faces." The Two Towns of Boston. I mean, not the 2 towns of Boston. Did I?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's it. I think that's a point that should be made and has already been made, actually. That it's not Jasper, Texas here. We're talking. This could have been the 2 towns of Washington, D.C., or the 2 towns of Los Angeles, or the 2 towns of Boston. I think I'm in kind of a particularly good place to see that, maybe a little bit better than some of you who may have spent all of your lives in the Boston area. Actually, I was born and raised in the Deep South. I was born in New Orleans, and I was raised in Houston, Texas, not too far from Jasper, and a place that had about the same mindset. And I grew up during Jim Crow. I remember the colored restrooms and the colored water fountains, and I was riding in the front of the bus when blacks were riding in the back. I was a child. I was a teenager. I'm a little older than you, and now that I'm 47, I feel my age. But it's kind of an interesting thing. I'm kind of responding to what Zena said about being different, because I saw as a teenager before I left, and I left when I was 17. I still eat chicken fried steak with cream gravy and grits, and I like jambalaya, but that's about the only thing left of my Southern heritage, I guess, for me. But I do recall seeing wholesale exploitation. I didn't see anybody killed. I didn't see the equivalent of James Byrd, but I saw blacks struggling and getting only the lowest paying, most unpleasant jobs, and having, listen, there were colored water fountains and restrooms, but it was not easy for black people in the South to find one. They'd have to think in the morning, if they were going to go to town, just how they were going to go to the bathroom, because and where were they going to eat lunch, and if they were traveling on the road, where were they going to find a motel that they could stay in? So, I understand these things maybe, and so kind of maybe as a result of that. And I want to tell you one thing. I didn't want to be different. I watched it and didn't do a lot about it. I mean, I could have, I suppose. I would have lost my friends, and I might have lost my life, but, I could have tried, and I didn't. And I didn't want to be different either. I understand that. And I wonder whether James Byrd wanted to be different in Jasper, Texas, because it sure got him into a lot of trouble, didn't it? But it's interesting that when people think of Jasper, Texas, now they're going to think of James Byrd's murder. That's all. And yet Jasper, Texas did a better job than many other towns in responding to this murder. What I tried to do was try to find out why. And Gordana Rabrenovich and I have been working on just looking for places where people get along, don't kill one another. They might not even like one another, but they don't kill one another, and they seem to live at peace in the midst of violence. And it's not easy to find these places. I mean, we found one town in Northern Ireland. We found a couple of communities in India where Muslims and Hindus don't kill one another, and despite the fact that violence is being perpetrated in all the surrounding towns. And we wondered why. And I think the answer that we came up with, there's more than one answer, there are lots of different factors, but the thing that we're focusing on can be seen in Jasper, Texas. Interdependence, cooperation. When people think of interdependence, they might think of friendship or neighborliness, and that is a form. That didn't happen very much in Jasper. But at the formal level, there was, to some extent, more than you find in a lot of other places, a sharing of power. And it was that formal interdependence, we think, that kept violence from being perpetrated in the aftermath of this murder. It wasn't just black violence. I'm talking about it on both sides. The Klan was there, but the Klan did not get a good reception from the white residents of Jasper. That everybody was humiliated by this. Even the ardent white supremacists were humiliated. It was incredible. I just ask you to think about what is it that held this town together. These were people who really identify with their community. You can find. I won't go into this now because I want to stop and give you a chance. But I think it's kind of an interesting thing. I've been at Northeastern for a number of years. It's really the only job I've ever had in my life, which is true. And I've held events about race, and I've attended many events about race. And when it's about race, you can pretty much count on very few white people being there. Well, they don't see any payoff for them. They see blacks and Latinos and Asians maybe, but white people don't have a problem with race, and so they don't attend. And this is different tonight. And I think the most optimistic thing about this film is you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, everyone. I want to take just a moment to thank all of you for coming before you start leaving in numbers, because I know you could have been doing other things this evening. I also want to thank and acknowledge those of you who are community leaders and members of the Institute for Race and Justice Advisory Board who've come out this evening to be with us. I'd also like to, before he steps out, ask my young friend Ernesto Arroyo, who is the son of Felix de Arroyo Sr., who has just been elected the first Latino on the Boston City Council, to give Ernesto a hand for his father. This is a bright moment in the city of Boston. Mr. Arroyo did not get the kind of press in the papers that we would have expected from a city of this stature and a city of this integrity, so we tonight are applauding him. Let him know that. The floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Any comments from our panel?
Well, I would say I totally agree with you. I guess when I tried to use that as a statement, I was trying to connect it to a history that exists currently, as you mentioned, and one that is deeply rooted in, many forms of tradition, value, systematic ways in which not only education, but politics and business and religion and all the social functions that exist in our society are kind of connected to and intersect with. And those symbols, as you said, are present and current, but they have a history that relates to slavery. They have a history that relates to the early 1900s and Jim Crow and that. So I was just really trying to connect it to maybe the root to where some of this pain comes from.
I'm so curious, though, about Jack's comment about interdependence. I am not from here. I grew up in Chicago. I've lived in New York, and I've lived in Oakland, California, and then my husband took a job at Bentley. And I cried for 6 months. And didn't come for 9. I don't mean to, disrespect my own folk, but I'm a doctoral student at BU. And I'm so tired of black people looking away from me when I speak in this city. I don't get it. And I think, here is my, having been here 8 years, here's my question, or my thought. It's not really a question, it's a thought. And I mean this seriously, I'm not being facetious. There's something about the rugged individualism that seeps up out of the ground in New England and enters people. I'm very serious. Enters people in general. And the kind of interdependence that I knew and could easily foster in the city of Oakland. I was dean of admission at a women's college. My husband was director of admissions at the University of California at Berkeley. And I became director at UC Santa Cruz. So the way we had to work together in that state, the state of California, we really were interdependent. Black and Latino folks couldn't get anything done unless they came together. There was, I can think of great interdependence. And when I think about Boston, black folks and white folks, it's really hard to identify interdependence outside of a group of about this big. So I don't get it.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I got to say, because I'm stunned by the way politics and how they play out here. I'm stunned by the lack of black leadership in this town, both in the faith and non-faith community. I'm stunned by the lack of political awareness of the city, and the race stuff is dumbfounding. Not because, I'm from the three towns that the gentleman earlier mentioned in terms of places being identified with hate crimes. We're all in New York City. But in place where I live, intimacy that he spoke of. But there's consciousness within 8 million people, within seconds of that, where you can find a political awareness and social awareness and an interdependency that creates a just society. I am stunned by in the state order of the Kennedys of what I'm thinking here along the lines of race politics.
I take Jack's comment as a challenge to really think about how we create that interdependence, given that we're not finding it. I mean, I really hear that as a marvelous challenge.
I want to encourage many people to put in your input here, including students, so we don't focus on any one person. Yes, ma'am.
Issue. I'm an Arab American, and within our activism, the problem that we face is preaching to the converted. A lot of the events that we hold end up just being our people who already believe in our cause and already agree with our political opinions, and we tend to be then isolated in our own communities, in a sense, on university campuses, in our own student centers, within our own student clubs, etc. And there isn't taken out into Boston or going into a community or
panelists?
Well, I just want to say a word in response to that, because I think the problem here is a lack of empathy that crosses groups. I think people have so much empathy for the problems of their own group. You know, each group thinks that its people has suffered more than anybody else. Poor me, oh. But try to get somebody to empathize with the problems of other groups. And for example, after 9/11, there were panels at colleges around the country. There were some at Northeastern, and thankfully there weren't just Muslims and Arabs on these panels. You know, I remember after during the Persian Gulf War, there were a lot of problems here, and Muslim students were being attacked. And you know, I remember, I'm not trying to brag, but I did go out of my way to make sure that I was on a panel in the Muslim Center here, to make sure that I was on a panel to express my indignation, and I'm not a Muslim. You know, and that's a model that I see. I think we have to go out of our way. If a black American is being attacked and you're white, make sure that you get involved. Don't let just blacks do it. Don't let blacks march through a city or demonstrate or picket. I mean, that's true if you're talking about gays or Jews or Muslims. You know, we're never going to solve these problems until we get involved in the problems of other people, and we make it known that we are angry, that we are indignant, and we are in the perpetrators group.
Questions from some of our students, of which most of you are, I'm seeing, which is pleasant. Yes?
I was just intrigued by your comment about the several communities that you've seen around the world that seem to have a sharing of power, and that's part of interdependence. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how that, if you've gone there, how that has come to be. If it's been kind of a procedural, if that sharing has itself been a goal, or if it's how it's come to be.
I won't take up a lot of time. I think I can summarize what I meant a little better. I think people have to need one another. You know, in some places, the members of one group see the other group as irrelevant. They have to need one another. They have to cooperate. They have to rely on one another to attain common goals. You know, in social psychology, a guy named Sharif found this out decades ago, and in the schools, we found that to be true in the 60s and 70s, and it's still true. You know where I saw this intimately? A few years ago, I learned that there had been 50,000 Jews in Bulgaria in 1943. Bulgaria, which is in Eastern Europe, not South America, Bulgaria was an ally of the Nazis, of Hitler. And there were 50,000 Jews. They were already at the schools and the train stations, you know, ready to be shipped to death camps. And there was an uprising of Christian, Orthodox Christian Bulgarian citizens, the Orthodox Bulgarian Church, even the king. And what happened is that they refused to let this happen. And part of it was a grassroots effort, and part of it was leadership that said, look, if Jews get on this train to the death camps, I'm going to be on there too. And then I looked, you know, and Gordon and I were looking at what was it in the history, and it turned out that Bulgarians, Christians and Muslims and Jews were good friends. They didn't see one another as irrelevant. They loved one another. I mean, that's not really my words. That's the words of Bulgarian residents who loved one another. And if the Christians had let these Jews go to death camps, they would have let their best friends, the people they loved, die. And that is what is missing in this country.
I ask you to think about anything in this film that particularly struck you as something that concerned you or that you had questions about. I wouldn't mind if any of my students who are here tonight asked these questions either. Since I made you come. Yes.
I'm struck by a number of things, and some of them have been said just to kind of reiterate. And it seems to me that a lot of what we've been talking about is needed is relationships, deep, personal relationships where people really connect with each other's pain. It was something that Sam said, that Reverend Zena said, we do have these stories, which she described as this in your gut feeling, but our own framework for how we think about the world and who people are in the world and what they do and the characteristics of these folks. And those stories don't change unless we're put into contact with folks that help us to reframe those stories, and get a different perspective than we would otherwise have. And we can't get to that depth if we're not connected with each other's pain. We can't be empathetic or see our interdependence if we can't connect with each other's pain. And we are often so busy trying to hide it that we don't want to share it with others and aren't willing to be vulnerable. What struck me in this film, too, was a couple of things that I saw as being really important. One was the importance of courage. I was really struck by Sean Berry, I think Sean Berry's brother, and how he sat there and wrestled with trying to write some kind of letter that he could read on the radio to really reach out to James Byrd's family, just to say, or even just to communicate to people that I do feel your hurt and pain. It is also mine. And I just wanted to say that. Knowing that some people weren't going to believe it, some people didn't want to hear it, and yet he had enough compassion and courage to stand up and say it anyway. I think there needs to be more of that. I think, as someone said, we are so focused on our own needs and struggles and issues that it's difficult for us to stand up and be courageous for others. And the more we do that, I think the more we will connect with each other. And then the other thing that I really saw in the film was the importance of faith. That there was a lot, regardless of denomination, there was really an importance of, faith communities coming together and being a resource for people during times of tremendous struggle, and working together to help people feel this sense of connection. And so it relates to the courage, too, that those of us of faith as well need to have the courage to speak very firmly and outwardly about our conviction and to live it so that it can help connect others.
Okay. Sticking your neck out for other people means that you're going to get a few scars. I can tell you that from personal experience on this campus. But I will not stop sticking my neck out, and I'm sure Jack and some of the others of us won't. Yes?
Similar but different. Speaking of interrelatedness and trying to find a balance between connectedness, maintaining your own identity, and part of it, I think, is this particular part of the country and this particular city where we're sort of motivated and driven to do things autonomously, and a lot of research and a lot of sort of things that run counter to what we're talking about. Last night, listening to an interview briefly about a gentleman who runs the country's oldest and sort of foremost African-American marketing company, speaking about the fact that BET now has a new channel that's competition and sort of, how there's plenty of, this is a whole untapped market and all this stuff. But one thing you mentioned, you said America's not a melting pot, it's a salad bowl. And I was curious about your comments, what you think of that paradigm shift, if that's a helpful way to sort of move our thinking about how to balance our quest to be interrelated and interdependent and rely on each other and love each other, but at the same time maintain identities and our own sort of relationships and smaller groups to friends and or culture.
Not wanting to play with semantics. The salad bowl doesn't work for me, but I'll tell you what does. And it's a tapestry. And if you stand back from a tapestry, it looks like a single picture. But if you get up close, you see that it is comprised of threads going both directions. And the most intricate have thick threads and thin threads, and threads that are invisible until you get up close, that everyone is necessary, and anytime one is broken, the whole is compromised. And then the back side of the tapestry is a mess. It is not smooth, it is not clean, it is not easy, and it requires maintenance, a lot of maintenance. I think we have to maintain our individuality because you don't bring half a self to a whole. You bring wholly who you are, but find ways to stand so contiguous that when you take one step back, it looks like a whole. But as you grow closer, you really see the uniqueness and the intricateness. And it's very hard in a place, in a city, and in an environment that one tells you you better figure out how to blend in, particularly if you're in academia. It's very hard where you are in a place where there are so many different ethnic groups within racial groups that you've got, you've got so many things to understand within racial groups. And Boston's not a great place for those conversations to happen. So we've got the knottedness. We've got the possibility of making this tapestry and making it beautiful. We've got to figure out, one, if we want to be woven next to one another. And two, if we can honor the threads that are bright, but understand that they can't exist without the ones that are subtle. And we don't have, this is an extraordinary dialogue opportunity. We don't have enough, possibly. But I think the uniqueness of the individual brings to the whole its beauty, its depth, its heart.
I love your woven analogy, and it sort of connects me with the initial remarks made by the out-of-towner, who's being very critical of the city I was born in. But I also want to speak directly and personally. I am not going to talk about my age, as have Zena and Jack. This is not going to happen. But I will put my cultural background on a block because it really does articulate that somehow in Boston, the world walked from 4 continents to make me. My family is Sioux Indian and Scottish and Roman Catholic on my mother's side. And they're German Jew and Cherokee and African American on the other side. Explain to me how that happened in Boston if it's true that this is a racist city. So I'm living proof that it can happen, and it will happen, and it has happened. And I have, in fact, noticed it much more greatly in the student population in our classes, that there are more mixed people, and this world is changing, and someday everybody's going to look like me. Yes, ma'am.
We're here on Dr. King's birthday. Today is the day, not Monday. He didn't believe in the death penalty. And I'm from Illinois, and I just spent the weekend there. So you can imagine what I was watching on TV. The 4 brothers that they released, and 89% of the 160 that they commuted their sentences looked like me. How can I believe in the death penalty? I don't. I'm very clear. What happened in this case, Sean Berry got life. The other 2 got the death penalty. It singed my emotions that I agreed with that cracker sitting at the table in the restaurant when he said, they'd be satisfied if they just got life, and I had to agree with him. Talk about relational angst. So I'm very clear because the death penalty is used against my community much more so than it's used for my community.
I want to make sure everybody knows what crackers are.
It's not the saltines. Sorry.
And no, but we've
I really didn't mean
we've
that.
invented a lot of very imaginary language to outgroup one another, and we live with this. Yes, ma'am.
At the risk of disrupting this warm and fuzzy feeling in the room,
Help yourself.
and I will say that I was born in 1955 to be the man. I might even be older than y'all over there. I have a problem with the film, and I haven't seen it all. And as a person who is a media person, I know that you edit things in a certain way to get a certain story. I think America is still afraid of black anger, and I didn't see that really in that film, and that bothers me. Because I know that there are black folks that were in Jasper that were highly oppressed. They weren't as controlled as those people in that film, even though they were families. And I think that if you're talking about power sharing and equity, we have to give people the right to be angry, whether they sin or not. And this is coming from a Christian. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I have a problem with me and my people being thrown in with everybody else. Because what happened to us did not happen to the immigrants, did not happen to the Jews, did not happen to other people. And see, I don't want to feel like I'm putting myself up or putting you down because I need to own my anger. I'm a Bostonian. I worked in the school department during desegregation. I watched what they did, and I went to the school system. I had a choice tonight to go down to the school department and watch these angry people who got the 10% cut and talking about, black children molesting other children, 4-year-olds, and things like that, because there's death in our community that until we deal with the anger, is really not going to spill out to y'all, because like we're the canaries in the mine. If we're hurting and we're dying, and eventually it's going to get to you. I have a problem with looking at a film that, can we all just get along? And, Rodney King was the poster child of the world. I spoke to people in China, and that's what they knew about black folks. Rodney King was Africa. I have a problem with that. I don't know how many people in this room even know where the African American Institute is, or the Latino Center is on this campus. And so this warm and fuzzy feeling is getting all yeah, I'm all hungry. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to take the black students and help them out that's in your class, within your room, or Latino students? Are you going to let them be pissed and not try to explain, well, it wasn't me and it wasn't my grandparents and we didn't have nothing to do with that, and be able to understand that? I mean, if we're going to do something here, it's just going to be, see, I'm a child of the 60s, so I marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. I marched and heard him out to speak. And I wasn't on the nonviolence, let the dog bite my family. That wasn't me. My father got killed in the 60s in the civil rights movement. So, I have a problem with us all being multicultural and being less than one. And the tapestry thing is cool, and the salad thing is cool, but I'm going to chili side, the hot kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think we can have an honest dialogue unless we let folks be angry and really stand on that and not try to apologize for it or not be, but understand it and let that go. And there is not that power sharing that is going to happen here in Boston, any place else, not traveling the country, and every place is racist. And it's not just, black folks, we don't get along. There's dynamics in every single place. But some people just smooth up there because they're educated. But it doesn't come down to white only, black only, it's like, oh, we work behind you, however, you don't necessarily get to remember this department. It's not a downside, like, well, same thing, we don't want you. We don't want you. And I think if you're going to have an honest dialogue, you cannot have an honest dialogue between people who are not equal. We're not an equal playing ground. It's not going to happen like that. Power is not given, it is taken. That's history. It's not given. And until, white folks understand that black folks are still pissed, and still pissed about what's being rolled back, and we died for it, we fought for the other people who are not us, are stepping on our shoulders and on our backs to get to, and we still haven't gotten it, we're not going to have an honest dialogue.
I want to very quickly share my first impression of the film. and we spoke about this yesterday when we were conference calling about how we would organize this evening. The first thing I remembered from the film was when the police officer at the very beginning of the film expresses his concern that he hopes this is not a certain kind of crime. I'm seeing heads nodded, so a lot of you also picked that up. He was expressing a very honest fear that he hoped this was not what he thought it might be in the core of his soul, and that is a black-on-white crime. Implicit in that, he was hoping this was a black-on-black crime, because we all know about how America deals and feels about black-on-black crime. It's almost as if it's okay in terms of segregating criminality in our culture, as well as our lives and where we go to schools. If black-on-black crime is okay and white-on-white crime is okay, but that space in the middle where we have black-on-white crime terrifies us all. Any more comments?
There is a piece in the film that is cut out. I really encourage you to watch it, where the Panther show up with a navigator full of guns. And they pull them out, and they cock them, and they hold them where everybody, the film crew, can see them. And it is fascinating how Byrd's family responds. There's a split in the family. There's some people in the family that are out there with them and talking and encouraging them, and you watch them cocking. And I have a quote, because we got to see the whole thing. This one brother says, Panther says, let the law handle it, or God, that's fine with me, but we need to take care of our own business in our own building. That's what one of the Panthers says. And then Waddell X shows up. And it's interesting how he is greeted and dealt with within the community. And the white folk are scared to death. Why did they show up? What they gonna do? And so there is a dialogue in there that really does lift up the anger and doesn't try and solve it, but leaves it for people to see and wrestle with. It's almost dead center, according to my notes, it's almost dead center the film, but it is there, and it's not short. So it really is worth watching it in its entirety. I appreciate your comments.
I just need to comment to support what my sister here from Brooklyn said, and my sister Sharon in the back said. I'm 48 years old, and I have experienced both situations that they both talked about. Differently from the both of them, I am one of the original busing children of the United States. Before MECO, it was Operation Excellence, and I one of those Operation Excellence kids. I know what it's like to have people standing there talking and yelling at you because we wanted a better education. So we went to the other side of town, to the other side of Boston. After leaving Boston, after getting my education, going back to Brooklyn, I experienced everything that Sharpton and everything that went down in Brooklyn with Betsy Nurse in Crown Heights. I lived in Crown Heights. So people really need to clearly understand, as Sharon said in the back, that it's just not, everything's just not all hunky-dory. And even though people may be of mixed heritage and everything, it still doesn't make it all right.
A student, I'm sorry, I want to let the students have a, yes ma'am.
Just a comment. One of my roommates has always said to me, I would never know what it was like to be in her shoes because we have a lot of dominantly white friends in our circle, and she's black. And I never really got it, and then I got the great opportunity to work on an Indian reservation that's the side of Connecticut for the last few months. I just got back. And being the white girl and having everybody know my name and know who I was a very different experience for me. And for the first time, I finally realized what she'd been saying to me all the time. And you can't really, it wasn't a feeling that I could have ever gotten, having not been in the minority. It was a very good feeling to finally know that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes.
I'm 58 years old. I've been a civil rights activist. I've been a civil rights activist all my life. My mother was a civil rights activist before I was. My father was a union organizer. The only time in my entire life that I can remember when we have had a progressive 1969, 70, we've been going straight downhill. We've been enjoying our collective ignorance. Avarice, greed, ignorance, individualism, no accountability, racism, been rampant all those years. Folks chose not to know. Nobody wanted to know. For whatever reason, as Malcolm X said, the chickens are coming home to roost. Now that we've practiced our individualism, institutions are falling apart, our governments are broke, our people are without health care, and the whole world hates us. And if you think that your fellow Americans did not work overtime to ensure that the world hates you, then you better read some of them books in that library. We got there on our own merits. The conservative element of society outmaneuvered us. They out-organized us. The people who do know, who should know, who were there, for whatever reason, sat down, laid down, but they quieted. And until you get together and you start demanding that your institution serve you to articulate a set of values, and that your institutions perpetrate those values, and that we're all in this together as independent, interdependent members of a society, we're going to be in trouble. And I'm going to tell you something. The battle is closer than you think. The battle is closer than you think. Because any 5 guys can walk in here and wipe this city out. All I got to do is go and get me a good shot of smallpox, and we're in trouble. The health system will collapse. They haven't trained any first responders. We're in trouble as a society. We've got to change it.
Can I jump in?
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah. I just want to say I'm 22 years old. see, it's important to me that I express that. No, I want to throw that in because I think humor and laughter, even in the time of seriousness, it's healthy. It's okay. It's healthy. I, too, share experiences of pain. Why I speak about the condition of the heart? Because it's important. The heart and the mind is the two vital organs that allows us to share this human existence that we share. And I think why it's important, because see, for me, and I'll talk about me and I will summarize this quick. For my 37 years of living, I've operated by this practice where I spent more time building up things outside of myself. I've been taught to pay attention to things outside of myself rather than the things inside of myself that are more essential for my life. I think our struggle is enormous and complex. I think there's education on various levels that needs to take place. I think anger is healthy, but communicated and expressed in a way that's healthy so that individuals can benefit and learn and grow and be transformed. Because if not, then what is it all worth? I've been living in the city of Boston for 35 years. During the Boston desegregation period in Boston, I'm a product of that. During that time when we were being escorted from Mount Vernon Street, where the Bayside Expo is right now, into the South Boston community, rocks and bottles and paints and people standing, community, adults, older than yourselves, picketing in front of the front entrance of the South Boston High School, and I'm a freshman, watching adults with these signs saying niggers go home. I became racist during that time. I disliked white people because white people were showing me a sense of dislike that I didn't understand. But over time, in healing and being frustrated and forcing myself to not only understand the difference that exists in me, but the difference that exists in other people, I became more healthier. I became more healthier. So I can have these conversations. I can look people in the eye. I can agree to disagree and know that it's healthy. And know that it's okay. And know that as long as I'm, like Gloria said, willing to step forth the courage to be a part of the change, that change will happen whether it happens in my lifetime. Because see, a lot of the change that we are seeing and have seen, there are people who have sacrificed their life who hasn't seen the change that a lot of us are benefiting from in their lifetime. They perished before the change was able to be manifested. So we have work to do. But I speak about the condition of the heart because the condition of the heart is essential to your ability not only to be able to connect, but to be able to express words of understanding, words of compassion, as well as words of hope. I'll close there.
We had an expression from the 60s, which I hope we might revive. Let there be peace. Let it begin with me. Sir? Thank you. We've had a lot of events in this room and on this campus post-crisis, whether it was 9/11. I know my sister here, former director of the Latino Center, sponsored Breaking the Barriers Conference. A lot of you came. But I don't see the level of social activism advancing on this campus. I don't see it increasing. So I'd like us all to take what the young gentleman has said to heart. Yes.
However, have we ever decided to look in our own backyard? This young there's a theme that goes along with the Martin Luther King Day since 1994. This is celebrate, act, remember. A day on, not a day off. Martin Luther King lived his life and died so that way, once again, we're able to sit here in this room. And we take so many things for granted. And I just want you to say, challenge yourself. Remember why you even have the opportunities you have here today. And why some people don't have the opportunities that they have.
We have time for just a couple more. Thank you. Couple more questions? Yes, sir.
There was a kernel of hope in the film. There was a point where Sean's brother, walking out of the courthouse, stopped and turned and shook he extended his hand to, I think, one of the members of the Byrd family. And it was almost an afterthought, but he knew he had to do it. He felt a draw, if you would. And I'm not from Boston, and I'm from Texas, in fact. When I got here, one of the things that I did habitually was speak to people when I walked past them. And I pastored a church here in South Bend. And I promise you, folks looked at me as though I had two heads. But I'm encouraged that I still speak to folk, and every once in a while someone actually will speak back. So I'm encouraged that there's an opportunity to, at least if we establish nothing else, to just speak to folk and to break the ice of the lack of human contact, and bring each other face to face with just speaking to someone.
Maybe just a couple more questions. There was a hand back there.
I'm a freshman at Northeastern. I truly am 18. I will not lie. And I find that it's kind of different because I came from Western New York, and I came from an area where there's still parts of the city where you can't go, where you don't go if you're a certain person. And like I said, you can find that anywhere you go. But coming to Boston, I've heard a lot of people say negative things about how the Boston area has kind of had limited points of perspective and limited points of view. But coming here, it's opened my eyes. I've had chances to go to different places and talk to people from all over that have just opened my eyes to different perspectives. Because I've been willing to have that perspective. I've been willing to go out there and hear what people have said. I've been willing to walk down the street and smile at everybody because we are all the same. And not everybody has to be an activist. Not everybody has to have a certain point of view and tell propaganda to anybody who has a willing ear. If you want to do that, fine. I'll be willing to listen. Because it all depends in my mind if you want to have an open mind and constantly be thinking and constantly have your eyes open. And I think that it, even in a different area that you are, where you're thrown into a different setting, that if you're willing to adapt, if you're willing to consciously think and take into consideration the context of where you are, who you're talking to, and anything else that could come into play with that, then there's always a learning experience. And I think that even though people of the white culture have been predominantly judging and predominantly focused on hate crimes, et cetera, it doesn't mean that I am. And there's still places where I'll walk down the street and I'll smile at somebody of their race, just for example. And they'll still look away at me like I did something wrong. When all I want to do is listen. And that's just what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to, I'm going to take a chance in saying this, I guess, but I'll do it anyway. Well, now, maybe Boston is more racist than some other cities. I certainly felt that way in the 70s during the busing period. But racism is all over this country. But consider this now. So let's say that you're black and you come to Boston. You got to deal with racism. But then don't you also have to deal with just a general rudeness? Now, think about it a second. Now, if you're black, how do you know whether it's because you're black or just because people in Boston are impolite? You got to do both of them, don't you? Just thought I'd try to put some light on this fire.
That's not true, Jack. That's not true, Jack. Is that true?
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Goodness.
Reverend McLeod talked about a note of hope in the film, and there was another one for me, though it came at a difficult point when one of James Byrd's sisters said of Sean Berry, he could have made a difference. He could have made a difference. What I took from that is that the power of one is crucial, and the power of many is critical. But it starts with the power of one. And not unlike the notion of speaking to one another daily, there are opportunities for us to be crucial and to find allies across the lines, whatever those lines might be, so that we can become critical as a mass. That, I thank Reverend McLeod for lifting that, because that also was a note of hope for me.
Okay. One more question, and then I'll tell you what's going to happen. We're going to officially say that the program is over. Those of you who want to stay, and wouldn't it be great if most of us stayed, will remain for whatever. We have this room for the evening, but I want to let those of you who need to leave or want to leave or need to catch buses or be with families to know that you can leave and we won't think bad things about you. Yes, there was a... Yes, sir.
What stems this lack of communication throughout the university? People not even saying hi to each other. It seems like more of negativity that goes through things, you know? I wrote down the quote, evil comes when great people do nothing. We have to realize we are the people, and we can do something, you know? And by not even communicating, this just accelerates the problem of not doing anything and making evil come. We need to stop this. And it starts right now.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
I just want to say, I think the problem a lot of times people don't think that it's happening to them. You're angry, I'm angry, we're angry about different things, but when they racially profile one people, they racially profile yours. They arrest you on the street because they think you're going to rob something. They're arresting me because they think I'm a terrorist. Come to my rally and talk to me about how angry you are, and tell you about how angry I am. We'll talk about our government. Listen to our conversations, put us in jail, take our names down, take our actions down without us having done anything. And they're going to do the same to you tomorrow if you give them that right. And so come to my rally and talk to me and think that my problem is your problem and you now will do something. Historically, what we've done is minorities have fought their own problems, have fought their own issues, their own values, but haven't united with one another. You don't see minorities sitting together talking about these civil rights violations that are occurring right now to the immigrant community as much as I'd like it to be. You see what I mean?
No, she's Arab American.
Okay, let me just say this. All of the struggles that people in this country have had were fashioned for the American Indians, Latinos, after the civil rights struggle. Okay? So to say that minorities in this country come together, that is not true.
No, I'm not coming together now.
Hold up. They don't arrest me because they think I'm going to commit crime, especially because I'm black. Some people what they think I'm going to do is because who I am. What I'm saying to you is that we as black people always been very positive on something for everybody else.
Could we quiet down, please? Thank you.
It was like, like the women's struggle. Oh, yes, we're all women. Oh, no, we don't want the black women. You know what I'm saying? So you don't talk about history. Let's talk about history. Let's not talk about your story. Let's talk about history. So we need to talk more about what black history is about. We start throwing that out in this crowd. They may not know that.
Hey, we all have a lot to learn, so I think we can agree on that. We can agree to agree on that. And before everyone leaves, I will confess that I am only 12 years old. So it's out there now. Any other comments before we close? I'm going to formally close it now, and then you can remain. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank you for bringing your presence.